RF exposure. Don't let it cook your goose. Coming up next on LCARA Ham Radio. Well, hello, folks. This is Chris, KY4CKP, with LCARA Ham Radio. And we just wanted to put out a quick video on a kind of a new topic, relatively recent topic that has gotten some highlight and some exposure, if you'll pardon the pun, here recently, and in particular as of May 3rd, 2021. This is a little bit after that, and that is RF exposure. And this is actually something that all ham radio operators should be familiar with, should be aware of, and should be proactive with. But to be honest, I think a fair number of us may have been just a little bit lazy on this point, probably more than a little confused on this point. And it doesn't really need to be that way. And so we just wanted to go over a few tools to help us do our station evaluations quickly and easily. You don't have to be any sort of a math genius to get this figured out. And you signed a document when you got your license that you would do this, that you would check out your station and make sure it was going to be safe for yourself to operate and safe for those around you. So we're just going to talk about a few of these tools that are available that haven't been around for maybe a real long time, but certainly these days it's much easier and simpler to work on these things. So I want to start here. We're going to use just some web resources, and we'll have links for all of these things down in the description below, so you can find these. I want to start right here on the ARRL website, and this is the FCC RF exposure regulations station evaluation little section here. And as you can see, January 1998. This is not a new topic, folks. It wasn't a new topic in 1998, really. This is something that wasn't really sort of enforced very heavily. Wasn't There were tons of exemptions and things. A lot of that has changed. That's really what has changed. The requirement for this, the acceptable allowances and things. Most of that stuff hasn't changed real dramatically. But what has changed are a lot of the exemptions are now gone, which a lot of that specifically related to amateur radio operators. And so also the expectation of the enforcement of this has gone up. Now, this is not to say that the FCC or ARRL is going to be driving around knocking on doors unless they get a complaint or something, which does occasionally happen. And that's why you're supposed to do this. Why we've always been supposed to do this. You're supposed to have evaluated your station to make sure it's safe for yourself and your neighbors and people around you. If they do come by your house, again, usually it would be generated by one or more complaints. You're supposed to be able to show them this information. Okay. Now the good news for today is it's really easy to do this evaluation now. 5, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, yeah, I'm sure it would have been a more difficult situation. But there's tools that make it really simple today, and we're going to cover those. So I just wanted to start here. We'll have links for all this stuff down below. But just talking about this, the sky is not falling. And again, most of this isn't very new at all. Most of this is quite old. Have we been good about doing this? Some of us, I'm sure, have been excellent about this. I'll be honest, I have not been real good about this. But now that we have these great tools, it's very easy to evaluate your station and have this documentation on hand, just like you're supposed to have your license on hand and to keep logs, things like that. So we just want to go over some information. So we'll have links to the ARRL site here. Also, we have a link to RF exposure in your Ed Hare, the lab supervisor there at ARRL, and he did a presentation on this. But this PDF is available for download. You can read through this, all the appendix and everything. and regulations. Again, I just want to show this off. We're not going to try to go over all this. You can read it for yourself, but we'll link to all these resources down below. But what I really want to do is kind of jump right into these tools that are available. So let's get rid of this web browser. And we're looking at a couple of tools here. We're going to look at three tools ultimately. We're going to start here on the left-hand side. Here on the left-hand side, you can see types of coax cable, line loss calculator. This is on qsl.net. Again, all these links will be down below. So this makes it easy to figure out some of the information that you'll need to plug into the calculators. Now, there's two calculators we're going to talk about. There's several others available online. You can pretty much use whatever you want. You may want to use one of the two we're going to show you just because one in particular is very, very easy to use. The one you can see right now. We'll talk about a second one over at HAMRadioschool.com. It's an Excel spreadsheet that you download and run locally, and we'll show that off here in just a few minutes. But the one here at hintlink.com/power_density-php, we'll have these links. It's a little easier to use, and you perform your evaluations, you sign and date it, you put it in your station documentation. If somebody were to come around and ask you for this information, which is always possible, it's not very probable by any means, but if you had somehow got a complaint, in many cases the complaints are totally unwarranted, but people don't always understand what's going on. Why is there such a big antenna sitting over there, or whatever it is? Should somebody come along and ask you, hey, you just go get your station documentation, you show it to them, you say, yep, I evaluated all my radios, all my frequencies, I'm good, my neighbors are good, there's no problem, and then you have no problem, or should not have a problem. So that's why we want to do this. And again, these tools make it so easy today. But probably where we want to start, before we try to jump into the calculators, is we're going to need to know some information about the coax that we're using. So I'm going to use my station as an example here. You can see I've already put in a few numbers. I've got LMR 400. I have 3 antenna feeds coming into my shack. One from my DX Commander, which is a multi-band vertical fan dipole type of antenna, where I can work with several bands, and you have to test each radio that you use and each band for that radio. So that comes in on LMR 400. I have a 2-meter 10-element Yagi antenna and a 70-centimeter 11-element Yagi antenna. Both of those come in on LMR 400. So all my cabling is the same. All the links are the same. But you can see the list up here. You just figure out, what do I have? Do I have RG8X, RG8? Do I have LMR 400? Do I have 213? RG213? Whatever you've got. The brand is not super important typically. The general type of coax is what we want to get. And then you can put in your information. So for my shack, if I'm using LMR 400, if my cable length is 110 feet, now if you do things in meters in your country, or you prefer to do that, you can switch to meters, but I'm going to do feet. Let's say I'm working on 20 meters. SWR, with the different frequencies I can do on the DX Commander, it varies 1.3 to 1.6 or 7 maybe. I just put 1.5. That'll be pretty close. And I have a 100-watt radio. So if I'm going to go ahead and output a full 100 watts, you run the calculation, and it'll generate these numbers on the right-hand side that you can see there. Now that we have these numbers, okay, now we can plug them into these calculators. So we'll work with these numbers that are up here. So the first calculator at hintlink.com. Again, the links will be below. You see this hot link over here, perform another computation. So let's go to the blank slate, perform a calculation. So you have 4 things you need to input. It's not real complicated. Average power at the antenna. All right, so that's one of the key things here. Average power at the antenna, not coming out of your radio, at the antenna, because there's loss. There's loss coming through your cable, your coax. That's why we did the coax calculation first, so we could get some of these numbers that we need. So here in the coax output, you can see My power output at the antenna, by the time it's gone through 110 feet of this LMR 400, is 88.288 watts. So we'll plug that in. You see, I've done this before. Antenna gain. Well, my antenna style is it has no real gain, so it's just a one. You can see if you have a typical dipole or something, 2.2. We'll do a test with my 10 element 2-meter Yagi, which I use to hit our club repeater about 65 miles away. It has a gain of 13.2. So obviously those big beams like that, they have a lot of gain. But this vertical fan dipole has effectively has a 1. Distance to the area of interest. So there's really two things you're trying to establish here. Are you going to be safe? However close to your transmitting, your antenna and stuff, are you and I mean your family going to be safe? So that's called controlled, right? That's the controlled exposure. And we are allowed a higher level of controlled exposure than the general public would be, which is uncontrolled. Okay. So because they cannot make a choice whether they get exposed or not. You're making the choice whether you want to be exposed to this or not. So for me, if I look at where my antenna is in the backyard with fencing all around, the distance from the fence to pretty much where anybody could be. Um, Now this calculator is going to do meters. So let's do 3 meters. Okay, let's do 3 meters. Let's say nobody can get any closer than 3 meters, 3, 4 meters, 5 maybe. But 3 is nice and conservative. Okay, and then what frequency are you going to operate on? So let's say we're going to test again. Let's say we're going to test 20 meters. Okay, and then you just have this final option down here at the bottom. Do you wish to include effects of ground reflections? To be most conservative, I would leave this on yes. Now, I have a ground mounted vertical, so there probably is ground reflections. This is probably proper for me to certainly have this. It's more conservative if you have this. It means your numbers are going to end up being a little bit higher. But if you can pass these equations with ground effects in the calculation, you know you're good, whether you should really have them there or not, right? It's just being more conservative. For my ground, I'm sure that's proper. Now, when we talk about my Yagi that's 35 feet up on a mast, ground reflections are probably not going to be really a necessary part of the calculations. I just leave them in anyway because again, I know it's more conservative. And if I can pass there, I know I'm passing. I would pass without it. And then you've got this really scary looking button down here, right? Calculate RF power density. You just click the button and it returns your results. Okay, it shows you some of the calculations that it made. Right, distance of area of interest. How close can somebody get that I don't have any control over it? 9.84 feet. Now, in my case, again, that's conservative. It would actually be further than that. I don't think any of my neighbors could get any closer than the very closest one would probably be 12 feet, and the rest would be further than that. But again, this is nice and conservative, and that's fine. We tested 2 meters. We included ground reflections, and here's what we want: controlled for me slash my family. Are we quote unquote safe? Yes, we are. Uncontrolled. My neighbors and people who could be out on the sidewalk or whatever the case is, are they okay? They're okay, yes. In other words, with this setup, I could be within 2.42 feet, right? Less than 2.5 feet away from my antenna, and I'd still be okay. Now that's during transmit, and something to keep in mind, folks, it's during transmit and it's over time. It's not just like a 1 second burst or something. It's accumulation of 6 minutes out of an hour, I think is the main thing. Um, Uncontrolled, people who are, I quote unquote do not have any control over. Well, they can be within 5.35 feet. Okay, and they can't get that close unless unless they're trespassing on my property, coming through a fence. I mean, there's a fence and everything. They couldn't just walk on even just walk on my property. So yes, I'm safe there. Okay. Now let's try another example here. Okay, because again, see how easy that was. You just use these two tools together, and you can quickly run through your radio and all the frequencies you do. If you don't have very many frequencies, you just do 2 or 3 of these and you're done. I have several frequencies I can do, so it just took a few of these. But let's try my 2-meter Yagi. Again, we're back over here on the left-hand side with the coax calculator. It's still LMR 400, still 110 feet, but now, right, it's 146. I'm just going to put my club frequency, our repeater, 146.880. Load. Let's go ahead and leave it 1.5. It's I think it's slightly less than that typically when I last checked it, but I know it's a decent SWR, well below 2 to 1. Power in. Now on I use a mobile unit for my 2 meter 70 centimeter base station. And on maximum power, which is what I use to reach out for 65 miles, turbo, I think they call it 60 watts. So we'll put in 60 watts. A lot of times mobile units may be 50 watts. You know, they can have some different ratings. So you just check with your radio documentation, radio manufacturer. You can certainly find that out. It may be on a sticker on the radio on the bottom or something too. Well, let's hit this scary button, right? The one that says calculate. All right, we got our numbers. So what's my power output at the antenna? 40.129 watts. I'm putting 60 in, but I'm only getting about 40 out. Now, one thing this calculator and the other calculator, I believe that we're going to show you, the Excel spreadsheet version, I don't think either one of these properly take into account height, which is reasonably important. But what it means is these are going to be more aggressive returns. Again, if you can pass with these without accounting for height, you know you're good because height makes a difference. If you're 35 feet in the air, that's different from being at the ground level or only 10 feet in the air and that kind of thing. So all right, we got our numbers. Let's plug them in over here. Average power at the antenna, well, 40.129. Now the gain. Now the gain for this antenna, the manufacturer says it's 13.2. 13.2, so we're going to put that one in. Now distance to the area of interest. Now this one, it's again, it's pretty far away. The closest anybody could get, again, without even factoring in height, which would be a benefit on my part, but we'll just sort of ignore that for now, because again, if I can pass without taking that into account, it means I'm good regardless. But the direction of the Yagi, my neighbor, if they were standing at the front corner of their yard closest to me, or just about at the sidewalk, public sidewalk, um, in meters, let's say 10 meters for that one. And then the frequency, 146.880. We're going to go ahead and leave ground reflections. Now, in this case, ground reflections may not really be relevant, but we'll leave it in there. Again, if you can pass with that turned on, you know you're going to be good regardless. We'll hit calculate. All right, and you see it only takes a second or two. It returns some information for you. Again, you just print up this page when it comes up, sign and date it, print it up, stick it in, or create a digital document, however you like to do that. Put it with your station documentation. Once you've tested all your radios, all your frequencies, you're good to go. And so you can see here, yes, we're going to be safe because for me, 13.61 feet, okay, for the uncontrolled environment, right, the my neighbors and anybody on the sidewalk and those people I don't really control, 30.37 feet. Well, they're at least 32, 0.81 feet. It's probably actually a little bit more now, again, because this isn't really taken into account the 35 feet up in the air. So it's probably 35 feet or more, 40 feet, as far as where somebody could be. But yes, we're now, the thing to take note here is we are pretty close. We are pretty close here. With my radio output of 60 watts and the 40.129 watts at the antenna, we're pretty close because of the distances involved. If I had a bigger property and, if you can extend the distance, if I could extend that distance to the area of interest, right, it would change the numbers. But I live in town, and so I can't do anything about those distances, as it would be, about as far as I can get it away from somebody, give or take 5 or 10 feet. So I can't put a whole lot more power into this. You could play with these numbers, and I think my brother and I were looking at this the other day. I think I could put out about 70 watts, and that would be about it. So I'm just about at my max power. They do make 2 meter and 70 centimeter amplifiers and things, but I don't really need it. But I wouldn't be able to do much more than I'm putting out now. So, but I'm compliant, right? So I print this up, I sign and date it, I put it in my documentation. I'm good to go for my, for my station on 2 meters. Then I could check 70 centimeters and so forth. So The coax calculator, very easy to use. It's a free resource, very easy. All these calculators are free resources, easy to use. So that's the one at the hintlink.com. Again, you'll see that link down below. Let's take a look at the spreadsheet. Right, let's take a look at the spreadsheet version. It's a little different. So when you come over here to the hamradioschool.com, just hamradioschool.com, RF exposure calculator, they've got a little bit of information here, and they've got the download RF exposure calculator. Now this is again, it's a local Excel spreadsheet, Microsoft Excel spreadsheet that you download. So you'll have to have an Excel program or a database program or spreadsheet program that's compatible with Excel files if you don't have Excel itself. So let's open that up. Let's see, there it is. You can see I had it open. So this is the hamradioschool.com spreadsheet. It's just a fancy spreadsheet, and they've got their areas where you can put in your numbers. Okay, now it's going to do its calculations. Now this is a little bit more involved, yeah, a little bit more detailed. It's probably a better word. A little more detailed calculator. As my brother said, he gave a nice presentation to our club at a recent hands-on event. I do kind of like this one because it's a little bit more detailed. I like the other one that we just looked at because it is just nice and quick and simple. They both let you do your test just fine. So let's run some of the numbers here. I'm going to see if I can shrink this spreadsheet down a little bit. Let's run some of the numbers. So let's go with what we were just testing. 60 watts, right? My coax length, 110 feet. Not doing digital. You see there's a little drop down here. Going to do FM. Transmit on percentage is 0.2, I think it is. 146.880. Okay, average power to the antenna, 10.05 watts. Antenna gain, I've got to change that because it's actually 13.2. Distance to area of interest. Now this is in feet. This one's in feet this time. So we had what, 32 feet last time. We'll put in 32 feet this time. And so we take a look at this. The controlled, right, power and the uncontrolled power exposure. You see it passes everything. Okay, it passes everything. Um, so again, it's still pretty easy to use. It's just it takes in a couple other factors into account. You can see some information down here at the bottom. It takes in a few other things into account, some of the numbers and things. So FM would be a 1. Let me change that to just a 1. Oh, yeah, that's right. So when you take a look at this, see, I changed that factor to a 1 because it said FM was a 1 there. So when you take a look at that, it says I don't pass on the uncontrolled. Okay. Um, the power density is fine. The power density with reflection. Remember reflection. Now, again, my antenna is 35 feet in the air. Reflection is probably not an issue there. Okay. Now, these are not quite the most accurate numbers I could put in there, right? Because my area of interest, like I say, because I'm 35 feet in the air, it would be at least 35 feet. Yeah. If I make it a more realistic number, I do pass. Again, like the other calculator showed us, with my 2-meter Yagi, I'm really close. I can't really put out much more power. I don't really need to, but I can't really put out much more power, okay, because of the distances involved. I can't really do anything about those distances. So it's still not a hard calculator to use. Again, once you use the coax calculator, there on the left-hand side, you just find your type of coax, put in your length, what frequency and so forth. Make sure you have, your SWR. And then you can use those numbers to plug into these other calculators. It's really easy to do this. And you may have to run a few of these if you work a few different bands like I do. It's not hard. I can do my entire station, 2 radios with 6 or 8 bands. You can do this in 15 minutes. It doesn't take long. It doesn't take long. And we're going to provide all these links down below. So again, the main thing we wanted to talk about is not that any of this is actually new. Let's go back just for a minute here. We'll start to wrap this one up because we're really done. That's how easy the tools are to use, folks. It's mostly just having access to them. Where were we over here? Back to the ARRL website. Um, There's really nothing new here. This is stuff that we have been supposed to be doing for several decades now, really. But there's just new emphasis on this, and some of the exemptions for amateur radio have been removed so that we aren't exempt anymore, and we do need to be proactive on these calculations. Uh, you don't mail anything in. There's no fees. It's all free, but you are expected to do this as ham operators. We are expected to do this and have this documentation on hand at our shack in case somebody ever stopped by. Just like you should have your license on your person if you are mobile or portable, and have it at your ham shack. So it's not really that there's so much anything new. It's what we've been supposed to do, but there's just some new emphasis, and some of the previous exemptions are gone. And so it was definitely timely to take a look at this. May 3rd, folks. May 3rd, if you've never run the test before, if you have a new shack, if you make a major change to your shack, you've changed antennas, you've added a radio, or started running more power or something. If you had an existing shack and you had run these calculations in the past, you're grandfathered in until 2023. You've got 2 years, but then you'll still have to start, do some updated evaluations. So definitely pretty timely to cover this. Obviously, other folks are covering this as well, which is a good thing. We want to make sure that we can reach as many people as possible, because with these modern tools, these websites and things, it's not difficult. It's not difficult at all to do this. So that's pretty much it. Again, all the links will be down below. It's pretty easy to run through these calculations, generate your documentation, and keep it with your shack and your license. So that's pretty much it for this one. RF exposure. You don't want to be exposed in a bad way. So this is Chris, KY4CKP, with Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Association. We'll see you in the next video, 73.